Chapter 3, The Prayer of Jabez by Bruce Wilkinson. Chapter 3, read by Jeffrey W. Jansen. Title of Chapter 3 is Living Large for God. Going live now. Hey everybody, my name is Jeffrey W. Jansen. This is Chapter 3 of the Prayer of Jabez. And as David Strauss pointed out to me, it is backwards on the live feed. I apologize for that. However, we are reading Chapter 3, Living Large for God. And here we go. Living large for God. Oh, that you would enlarge my territory. The next part of the Jabez prayer, a plea for more territory, is where you ask God to enlarge your life so you can make a greater impact for Him. From both the context and the result of Jabez's prayer, we can see that there was more to his request than a simple desire for more real estate. He wanted more influence, more responsibility, and more opportunity to make a mark for the God of Israel. Depending on the version you're reading, the word territory can also be translated coast or borders. For Jabez and his contemporaries, the word carried the same emotional power as the words homestead or frontier did for generations of American pioneers. It spoke of place of one's own with plenty of room to grow. In Jabez's time, part of Israel's recent national history was Joshua's conquest of Canaan and the partitioning of the promised land into chunks of real estate for each tribe. When Jabez cried out to God, "Enlarge my territory," he was looking at his present circumstances and concluding, "Surely I was born for more than this." As a farmer or a herdsman, he looked over the spread of his family. He passed down to him, ran his eye down the fence lines, visited the boundary markers, calculated the potential, and made a decision. "Everything you've put under my care, O Lord, take it and enlarge it." If Jabez had worked on Wall Street, he might have prayed, "Lord, increase the value of my investment portfolios." When I talk to presidents of companies, I often talk to them about this particular mindset. When Christian executives ask me, "Is it right for me to ask God for more business?" my response is, absolutely. If you're doing your business God's way, it's not only right to ask Him for more, but He is waiting for you to ask. Your business is the territory God has entrusted to you. He wants you to accept it as a significant opportunity to touch individual lives, the business community, and the larger world for His glory. Asking Him to enlarge the opportunity brings Him only delight. Suppose Jabez had been a wife and a mother. Then the prayer might have gone, "Lord, add to my family, favor my key relationships, multiply your glory, the influence of my household." Your home is the single most powerful arena on earth to change a life for God. Why wouldn't He want you to be mighty for Him? No matter what your vocation, the highest form of Jabez's prayer for more territory might sound something like, "O God and King, please expand my opportunities and my impact in such a way that I touch more lives for your glory. Let me do more for you." When you pray like this, things get pretty exciting. Moving the boundary lines. During a week-long speaking engagement some years ago at a large Christian college in California, I challenged students to pray the Jabez prayer for more blessings and greater influence. I suggested that the 2,000-member student body set a ministry goal worthy of a college of its stature. Why not look at the globe and pick an island? I suggested. When you have picked it out, put together a team of students, charter an airliner, then take over the island for God. Some students roared, some questioned my sanity, but nearly everyone listened. I persisted. I had to be the island of Trinidad and seen the need. I told him, "You should ask God for Trinidad," I said, "and a DC-10. I had no immediate takers. Still, the challenge prompted a flurry of stimulating conversation. I found most students eager to do something meaningful with their time and talents, but unsure where to start. They usually made a point of listing their deficiencies in skill, money, courage, or opportunity. I spent much of that week asking a question. If the God of heaven loves you infinitely and wants you in his presence every moment, and if he knows that heaven is a much better place for you, then why on earth has he left you here? With student after student, I pressed home what I understood to be a biblical answer to that question. Because God wants you to be moving out your boundary lines, taking in new territory for him, maybe an island, and reaching people in his name. God was at work. A week after I had returned home, I received a letter from a student named Warren. He told me that he and his friend Dave had decided to challenge God's power and ask him to bless them and enlarge their borders. Specifically, they had prayed that God would give them the opportunity to witness to the governor of the state that weekend. Throwing their sleeping bags in Warren's 63 Plymouth Valiant, they had driven 400 miles to the Capitol to pound on the doors. The letter continued. By Sunday night, when we got back from Sacramento, this is what happened. We had expressed our faith to 2 gas station attendants for security guards. The head of the U.S. National Guard, the Director of the Department of Health, Education, Welfare for the state of California, the head of the California Highway Patrol, the governor's secretary, and finally, the governor himself. As God is making us grow, we are thankful and scared stiff. Thanks again for your challenge. That was just the beginning. Over the next weeks and month, a vision for more territory swept the campus. By fall, a student team headed by Warren and Dave had mounted a major mission project for the following summer. They called it Operation Jabez. Their objective, assemble a team of self-supported student workers, charter a jet, and you guessed it, fly to the island of Trinidad for a summer of ministry. And that is exactly what they did. 126 students and faculty signed up. By the time the jet took off fully loaded with Los Angeles, Operation Jabez boasted trained teams ready to minister through drama, construction, vacation, and Bible. I got a train coming. School, music, and home visitation. The college president called Operation Jabez the single most significant student ministry venture in college history. 2 students had asked God to enlarge their territory, and he did. One little prayer had remapped boundary lines and impacted the lives of thousands of people. I think this is my appointment. The Jabez prayer is a revolutionary request, just as it is highly unusual to hear anyone pray, God, please bless me. So it is rare to hear anyone plead, God, please give me more ministry. Most of us think our lives are too full already. But when in faith you start to pray for more ministry, amazing things occur. As your opportunities expand, your ability and resources supernaturally increase. 2. Right away, you'll sense the pleasure God feels in your quest and his urgency to accomplish great things through you. People will show up on your doorstep or at the table next to you. They'll start saying things that surprise even them. They'll ask for something. They're not sure what, and wait for your reply. I call these encounters Jabez appointments. I remember the first time I asked for one. It was in a very surprising place, aboard a ship off the coast of Turkey. I was traveling alone, scouting a tour company that specialized in taking groups around the Mediterranean, following in the footsteps of the early church. We had enjoyed beautiful days aboard with plenty of time for me to work on various projects. But I was getting lonelier by the day. The morning we anchored at Patmos, the island where John wrote the book of Revelations, I hit bottom. Instead of taking the guided tour, I walked around the streets of the little port talking to the Lord. Lord, I feel so homesick and weak, I prayed, but I want to be your servant. Even now enlarge my borders. Send somebody who needs me. Entering a small square, I took a table at an outdoor cafe and ordered a cup of coffee. A few minutes later, I heard a man's voice behind me. You, on the cruise ship. I looked up to see a young man walking toward me. Yes, I am, I said. How about you? He said he was an American living on the island, then asked if he could join me. His name was Terry. Within minutes, he was pouring out his story. As it turned out, his marriage was on the rocks. In fact, that day was the end. His wife had said she would be gone by evening. You know what I was thinking by that time, don't you? Okay, Lord, I think this is my appointment, and I accept. Do you want your wife to leave? I asked. He said no. Open to a couple ideas, I offered. When he said yes, I knew it was the Lord's confirmation of another Jabez experience. I spent the next hour talking through several key biblical principles for a happy marriage. Terry hadn't heard of even one before. By the time I was done, Terry was so anxious to give his new insights a chance to save his marriage that he jumped to his feet. Listen, Terry, I said, I really want to hear how things go for you and your wife today. Whatever happens, come by the boat before we sail and tell me, okay? Terry agreed, waved, and was gone. By that evening, everyone was back on board. I walked the deck, waiting. I was still lonely, kind of frustrated, and starting to second-guess what had gone on inside Terry over coffee. When the captain ordered the final blast announcing our departure, I walked to the back of the ship where the crew was busy throwing off the stern lines. And there, running towards us along the shore, came a young couple hand in hand. When they got close enough to see me hanging over the rail, they started yelling, "It worked! It worked! We're together!" The rest of the voyage, I was so exhilarated at what God had done that I felt like I was floating without helping from the ship. God had made an appointment for that young man and me. He had been bringing us toward each other from the moment. I had asked for a larger life in his service, living by God's math. Whatever our gifts, education, or vocation might be, our calling is to do God's work on earth. If you want, you can call it living out your faith for others. You can call it ministry. You can call it every Christian's day job. But whatever you call it, God is looking for people who want to do more of it. Because sadly, most believers seem to shrink from living at this level of blessing and influence. For most of us, our reluctance comes from getting our numbers right, but arithmetic completely wrong. For example, when we're deciding what size territory God has in mind for us, we keep an equation in our heart that adds up something like this: my abilities plus experience plus training plus my personality and appearance plus my past plus the expectations of others equals my assigned territory. No matter how many sermons we've heard about God's power to work through us, we simply gloss over the meaning of that one little word, through. Sure, we say we want God to work through us, but what we really mean is by or in associate with. Yet God's reminder to us is the same one He gave the Jews when they returned from captivity to a desolate homeland. Not by might nor by power, but my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Zechariah 4:6. Our God specializes in working through normal people who believe in a supernormal God who will do His work through them. What He's waiting for is the invitation. That means God's math would look more like this: my willingness and weakness plus God's will and supernatural power equals my expanding territory. When you start asking Ernst, begging for more influence and responsibility with which to honor Him, God will bring opportunities and people into your path. You can trust Him that He will never send someone to you whom you cannot help by His leading and strength. You'll nearly always feel fear when you begin to take new territory for Him. But you'll also experience the tremendous thrill of God carrying you along as you're doing it. You'll be like John and Peter, who were given the words to say at the moment they needed them. One day, in answer to Darlene's prayers for an enlarged ministry, a neighbor we hardly knew came knocking at our door. "Ma'am," she said through tears, "my husband is dying and I have nobody to talk to. Can you help me?" Larger borders, an appointment to keep. Recently, on a cross-country train trip, I prayed again that God would enlarge my borders. While I was eating in the dining car, I asked the Lord to send someone who needed Him. A woman sat down across the table from me and said she needed to ask me a question. She knew my name, but little else about me. She looked deeply agitated. "What can I do for you?" I asked. "I'm afraid of the Antichrist," she replied. "For 50 years, I've lived in dread that I won't recognize him when he comes and that I'll be deceived by him and receive that mark of the beast." That point-blank question from a woman I'll never meet again led to a moving conversation and beautiful spiritual deliverance. Larger borders, an appointment to keep. Your front row seat. To pray for larger borders is to ask for a miracle. It's that simple. A miracle is an intervention by God to make something happen that wouldn't normally happen. That and nothing else was what Jabez had to have to transcend his name and transform his circumstances. Do you believe miracles still happen? Many Christians I've met do not. I remind them that miracles don't have to break natural law to be a supernatural event. When Christ stilled the storm, he didn't set aside universal law. The storm would eventually have subsided on its own. Instead, he directed the weather pattern. When Elijah prayed for it to stop raining, God directed the natural cycle of drought and rain. In the same way, God's miracle-working powers were clearly in evidence when, knowing Terry's need, he brought us together at Patmos, and when, knowing the needs of a woman on the train, he arranged a conversation between us. The most exhilarating miracles in my life have always started with a bold request to expand God's kingdom a lot. When you take little steps, you don't need God. It's when you thrust yourself in the mainstream of God's plan for this world, which are beyond our abilities to accomplish, and plead with him. Lord, use me. Give me more ministry for you, that you release miracles. At that moment, heaven sends angels, resources, strength, and the people you need. I've seen it happen hundreds of times. God always intervenes when you put his agenda before yours and go for it. Amazingly, if you have prayed to the Lord to expand a border, you will not recognize his divine answer. You have a front row seat in a life of miracles. Next chapter will be chapter 4, The Touch of Greatness. I am going to stop this, and then I've got the next book, which more people listen to, The Dream Giver, so I'm stopping this now.